All right. Well, it's a Wednesday morning. I hope that you're all excited to hear more about the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. My name is Christy Splitt. I am the Department of Energy's Government Relations Coordinator, and I'll facilitate our conversation today. I'm glad that so many of you are here to join us because I think this is a really exciting opportunity for Oregon's communities, including your community, an energy resilience and renewable energy grant program that can support both planning and projects. As we get started, I hope you will take a minute and introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name and any affiliations. So our agenda for today is that we will go over the program for a few minutes, and then we'll hear about a project example just to kind of get those creative juices flowing. And then we will also talk through the application process and take your questions. So one thing that we're really game with is you all going ahead and putting into your chat, any questions that you have as we're going, any comments you have, and then we can go ahead and grab those so that you don't lose them in your mind. We can go ahead and grab those when it gets time for the Q&A, or if it's something that's really timely, I'm happy to interject with a question or two if it makes sense. So just know that use the chat, and then the other thing is that you can use your hand raise function. We'll talk about that. Next slide. So I know WebEx is sometimes, it's maybe getting more familiar as time goes on, but you might not be as familiar with WebEx as with some other webinar platforms. So I just wanted to make sure you knew how to use the chat and also how to raise your hand. So we've got here an example page. I know my page looks black, maybe yours looks white, but we think this is hopefully something that you're seeing on your end. And you can see where the chat is, where you can chat to everyone, or you could chat to just me if you wanted to, for example, in the bottom right-hand corner. You can raise your hand. There's two options. One is you can click the smiley face icon down at the bottom, and the very top option is a raise hand function. We kind of joke we want to point it out because the raise hand icon is like kind of a mild colored this, which doesn't really look like a raised hand. So just know that that's what it is, a little bit of a raised fist look. So that's to raise your hand there. You can also click next to your name to raise your hand. And if you do ask a question or make a comment, then you can go ahead and lower your hand afterwards. That'd be really helpful. We have a big crowd today, so hand management will be a struggle. So thank you for making sure you lower your hand. I also just wanted to flag for folks that the meeting will be recorded. We'll post it on our Community Renewable Energy Grant webpage so that you can look at it later or send it around to someone who missed it, anything like that. So happy to see so many people introducing themselves in the chat. That's great. And then the other thing that I will ask is if anybody has any questions about the agenda or about WebEx, to raise your hand now as a test. And also you can go ahead and chat any questions that you might have as well. Oh, look, we have a raised hand. It's so exciting. See, I have to find a couple people have raised hands. Okay, hopefully these will just be, or maybe you're just testing it out. Okay, just testing it out. Great, perfect. Okay. Thank you for doing that and lowering and raising. Very well done. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is hand things over to Rob Delmar and James Kogel, who are the certified smart people when it comes to this new program, and will help answer questions later too. So Rob, I will switch the slide and let you take it away.
All right, just checking audio. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Got a thumbs up, thanks. I know we do this a lot and it should be working by
Hey
now.
Rob, at least I can't hear you. I don't know if others can.
I got one thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of I can hear
Maybe.
you. So
Oh, you can hear Rob. It's just me. I will figure out my audio. Thank you. Sorry, Rob.
All right. Well, thank you, Christy. And as she said, my name is Rob Delmar, and I'm a senior policy analyst with Oregon Department of Energy. And House Bill 2021, also known as the 100% Clean Energy for All bill, established the new Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. The purpose of the program is to offset the costs of planning and developing community renewable energy projects, support projects in traditionally underserved communities, promote small-scale community renewable energy projects, and provide direct benefits to communities across Oregon by improving energy resilience, creating local jobs, promoting economic development, and offsetting local energy costs. Next slide, please. I think Christy still can't hear me, so I will type in. There we go. All right. One of the features that distinguishes this program from previous programs in Oregon is that it's only open to public bodies. So eligible applicants include tribes, cities, counties, other public bodies, and consumer-owned utilities. The bill excludes cities over 500,000 in population, which in Oregon, of course, includes only Portland. And this exclusion was done in the recognition of the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which can provide funding for similar types of projects within the city limits of Portland. Next slide, please. Maybe I can, there we go. Okay, maybe I'll. All right. Another feature of the program is the focus on community energy resilience. The bill establishes carve-outs where 50% or more of the funding must go to community energy resilience projects. And there's a second carve-out where 50% or more of the funds must go to primarily serve one or more qualifying communities. And next slide. And qualifying communities are defined within the statute, and they include communities of color, low-income communities, tribal, rural, and coastal communities, and other traditionally underrepresented communities in Oregon. Next slide. The bill also called for an advisory committee to work with Oregon Department of Energy on program design and now program implementation. And this committee was instrumental in sharing on the ground experience with project development. They helped us to write the rules. They are located in communities across Oregon and continue to help us spread the word for the program. And so the committee has been instrumental in putting this together and continues to serve us well as the program continues. Next slide, please. So since the passage of House Bill 2021, we've been very busy standing up the new program. In the summer of 2021, ODO staff were assigned to the program and developed an implementation plan, including operational staffing and IT changes within the agency. In September, we recruited the Stakeholder Advisory Committee to help guide the program design and support the rulemaking. That effort resulted in draft rules being posted with the Secretary of State's office on January 1st. And those rules are now final. The opportunity announcements for the program came out on March 7th. Next slide, please. Now, before we move on to the specific grant opportunities, I'd like to walk through a project that EWEB, the Eugene Water and Electric Board, completed a few years ago. The city of Eugene, like much of Western Oregon, could be subject to significant damage from a Cascadia earthquake. As a utility that manages both electricity and water services, EWEB recognized the importance of energy to water delivery and was well positioned to support resilience and disaster recovery within Eugene. Next slide, please. EWEB considered community resilience based on the rule of threes. And that was in the first 3 days, they would like to be able to provide access to drinking water. In the first 3 weeks, they would like to repower critical facilities. And in the first 3 months, they would like to restore the system for regular operation. Next slide, please. So as a result of their planning efforts, EWEB developed the Grid Edge demonstration project. The project utilized an existing 50 kilowatt PV system on the roof of the Howard Elementary School and added a battery storage system and a new potable water well on site. Next slide, please. And so the result is a facility that can serve as a potable water fill station for the community in the event of a power outage. The school building is also provided with backup power and serves as an emergency shelter. And the system also provides value to the community in addition to the water and energy resilience features. The school benefits from energy bill savings, and EWEB is also able to use the batteries to provide grid services during their day-to-day operations. Next slide, please. So this is a schematic diagram of the microgrid system showing the electric loads that can be served by the system during a power outage. The battery storage units, and they're shown at the bottom in black, can be charged by the solar and natural gas generator, assuming that generator is available in the event of an earthquake. The water well and critical loads within the school are shown in green, and the switch shown at the main breaker towards the top is a safety feature, and that ensures that this microgrid is isolated from the rest of EWEB's distribution system, and that's to protect linemen who are out working on disaster recovery. And now that the program is up and running, the agency has started to hire staff that will run the program from here. Pandian Krishnaswamy is on the line today and is our energy services manager. And James Kogel has been leading the work on program nuts and bolts and will take over the presentation from here.
Thanks, Rob. So the program will provide grants for planning and constructing renewable energy and energy resilience projects. Opportunity announcements were posted on March 7th, and there were 4 of them, one for each of the project categories. $12 million was made available between the 4 opportunity announcements, and more opportunity announcements will be announced after this round closes with additional funds. Online applications are now open. We will only be accepting applications through the online application. Next slide, please. Opportunity announcements outline the minimum required information for a complete application, as well as detailing how applications will be scored during the review process. This includes required information about the project, the applicant and partners, and consultation with different stakeholders and groups. Following a review of applications to make sure they contain all the required information and are eligible for the program, the applications will undergo a competitive review process assessing the strength of the project and its feasibility, as well as how the project meets the program's priorities and targeted benefits. The scoring criteria include topics such as the project leadership and involvement of environmental justice communities, jobs and economic development, direct energy cost savings for families and small businesses, inclusion of inclusive hiring and promotion policies, procurement of services from disadvantaged businesses, assisting with natural hazard mitigation plans, and geographic and project diversity. The grants will be awarded on a competitive basis. At this point, we don't know how many grants will be awarded and how the funding will be distributed across the 4 categories. How the funding will be distributed will depend on the number and strength of applications in different buckets, along with the required funding allocation state and legislation. Next slide, please. So the online application is available now, and after we get through the slides, I'll be able to kind of walk you through it. but you can access it from the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program webpage. The arrow points to one of the links you'll be able to access it through. Next slide, please. You can also access it from Odo's customer service portal by clicking the drop down on the financial incentives menu at the top. Next slide, please. Before I get on to walking through the application, I wanted to just kind of talk about the process with applicants, and this is kind of the flow chart shows. We've extended the deadline for applications until July 8th. And if you have any questions about the opportunity announcements, please submit them by June 17th. Again, we've extended that deadline as well. This will allow staff time to respond and post answers online before the close of the application period. There are resources on the CREP website, the Community Renewable Energy Program website, including a checklist of information that applicants will need to gather, some Q&A summarizing questions we received so far from potential applicants and our responses to those, and also a list of resources that applicants may find helpful, particularly in demonstrating how their community fits one of the qualified community definitions, or in terms of the resiliency benefits. Following the close of the application, they will be reviewed, after which the successful projects will be offered a performance agreement, while unsuccessful projects will be able to reapply in future opportunity announcements. Applicants will be able to request up to 30% of the grant funding upon signing a performance agreement. For the construction grants, the applicant must have taken meaningful steps to seek site control, filed the request for interconnection with a host utility or appropriate transmission provider, and met any of the requirements provided in the by the department in the performance agreement to be eligible to receive that 30% following the signing of the performance agreement. Next slide, please. So thanks for listening, and I'm going to briefly show you the application, and then we'll be happy to take any questions you have regarding the program, or any specific information you would like more detail on. So I will just share my screen now. 1 second. So you should all be seeing the application portal where you can access the digital application. And so you'll see I'm actually signed in to the digital application. So if you're coming in for the first time, you'll need to register a profile, or if you're coming in having logged off previously, you'll need to sign back in. You'll be able to access the application from this drop-down menu, and we have you can learn more. You can complete planning or construction. You can amend your application. We'll actually withdraw your application until you submit any amendments if you're amending an application. You'll also be able to view the status of your application or withdraw it fully from consideration. If you want to kind of work on your application, then come back to it. If you just click back on whichever application you're applying for, it will take you back to the last saved place. So here we go. So once you access your select an application to apply for, you'll be given information about the eligibility requirements for the program and asked to confirm whether or not you and the project meet those requirements. So I've kind of so I can quickly answer that question from Jenny. It does save partial application. So this is me having filled out an application, and every time you click the next button down at the bottom here, it saves the what you've put in. There are required fields, so those have to be filled in before you can go to the next page, but it will save at that point. And if you leave that page and come back and you select, you'll be able to kind of go back into the planning. You will need to complete a planning application before you can start another application now. And so you'll be able to submit application information here. I'm trying to see if I can see the chat. Not as easy. Oh, yes, I can.
I can help you with the chat here.
Yeah.
I think I was gonna just wait for the questions because they're more like they're less about the application other than the one you just saw.
Okay. Great.
There is one that is about the application now. Oh no, there's a bunch of new ones. Okay. So one was we'll be able to get a list of the questions so we can prepare responses offline. And yes, there is a document like that. Maybe Patricia can grab the link for it.
We still need to publish that one.
Oh, we haven't published it yet. Okay,
No.
I didn't realize that. Okay, well, we do have one that seems ready to go. We just need to get it online. But yes, we'll have that. It's almost like a checklist of like what information you need to have with you.
Well,
And
the
then
list of information needed is available already and published. The list of questions that are in there is different.
oh, okay. They're very like the thing that I'm talking about, the checklist, I think does the trick for what is being asked.
Okay.
And then Jenny followed up with the two applications, and I think you already answered that you would need to do one and then you could start another one. Is that right?
Yes, you would need to complete one application. If it was planning, you could start a planning and a construction, and you could have those going at the same time, but you would need to complete planning before you could start another planning application.
Great. And then one question was, can multiple parties work on the same application? I would assume they could if they're using the same login.
Yes, as long as it would have to be the same login to be able to access the same application. You probably wouldn't want to be working on two separate computers on the same application at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But you would be able to kind of independently work on it. Yeah.
And then the next question was, can we download a Word version of the application, which is, I think, the thing that you're talking about that we haven't posted yet.
Yeah.
Yep, we're working on that. And then there's now a link to the check-in, and then Jenny Hall again with, is the login based on your email address?
You do need an email address to log in, but you'll have a username, and you can either use your email address as your username, or you can have to create a username as well.
And then the rest of the questions I see, I think of as ones that are less about the application and more general. So I will just work through those once we get to the Q&A if you want to finish going through this.
Okay. So here, first page is about the application information. And that is just about the applicant organization. And you'll also be asked down the bottom here to provide an applicant contact details. And that'll be the person that Odo will contact with questions about the application or how the application is progressing. At the bottom, you're asked whether you're partnering with another organization or not. To walk you through it, I've said yes. So we can kind of see this here. You'll be able to fill in information about the applicants. To add more applicants, you can just click on the Add Partner button over here. And it pops up a little screen, and you can submit your information about the partner. If you want to remove it or edit them, you can select that at the side there. And then ask you whether you're, as a reminder, for some partners, you need to provide documentation as well. We provide that information of what documentation is required. For instance, for a private business, it has to be located in Oregon, and you can just upload those files down at the bottom here as well. And then for consultants, if you're using a consultant or contractor, you can add in some information about the contractor. If you're not, it's not required. You can also say, if you get to this page, also it's not currently known, or you can, so that's fine. It just allows us to better assess the project team if you have a contractor and you're using them and you put information about them in. So then we go through and you're able to start putting information in about the project itself. And so starting with a description of the stakeholder consultations, And as you go through the application, you should be able to follow along with the opportunity announcement that you're applying for, as the flow of questions, wherever possible, follows the order of questions in the minimum required information section of the opportunity announcement. There are a couple of additional questions that stem from the competitive review section that come into appropriate places in the application. But for the most part, it kind of follows that minimum required information section of the opportunity announcement. So if you have looking for more details, you'll be able to kind of work your way through those as well. So there are sections.
Can I ask a question that's related to what you're talking about?
Yes.
Great. Are there word limits on these sections that you're walking us through?
So there is a 2,000 word limit in here. I think it's a word limit. So there is a limit right now. If that becomes an issue, we can explore in the future about how we can add on to that. But there is, again, you have this opportunity to choose file, upload files at the bottom. So if you find yourself limited by 2,000 characters, thank you. So it'll be 2,000 character limit. And if you find yourself limited by that, then you'll be able to kind of upload a document and refer to that document. Obviously, we would prefer if you're able to kind of fill in the details in the digital application, but if you feel like you need to supplement that answer with additional evidence, for instance, with the stakeholder consultation, or in other sections, you can upload them at the bottom of the page. So as we go, the sections you can see at the bottom for each section of the kind of minimum required fields that in the opportunity announcement. So sections for project description, which are about now, project plan, community benefits, equity considerations and finances, as well as a document checklist at the end. So here we kind of pop up a little description of what actually a community energy resilience project is. And the same with if you selected the renewable energy project, there's the definition from the statute about what that project is to make sure you have that in mind as you're going through. So as you see, there's a list of questions for each section. I just kind of filled in test answers here so we could progress through. We get to the project plan, and again, this all follows the opportunity announcement, and on each page you're able to upload files at the bottom. And in each of these, it is that 2,000 character limit on each of the sections. But as you see, you were able to, if you need to supplement your answer, there is that opportunity to upload documents. But we would like to emphasize that if you're able to kind of fit your answer into the box, then that does help with us processing the applications. So then onto the community benefits section. This is just following along on the opportunity announcements. This is where some of the priority scoring comes in as well. So you'll see maybe a couple of extra questions coming in to this section that relate to that competitive review scoring criteria that's listed in the opportunity announcements. And here we have the finance section. You're able to input for the planning and the construction, the required information is slightly different, and the format of the questions. So here with the planning, you're able to input the costs, specific costs, the total cost of the actual project, and then the actual cost that the grant request amount in, which is for the planning grants, as you see, this is a maximum of 100,000, but up to 100% of the project costs. With the preliminary payment, up to 30% of that, you're able to add in monetary contributions from other funding partners. So this may be federal, state, utility incentives, and so you go just kind of add them in, just like you would for the partner information or the contractor information, kind of slipping those in, or if you need to remove them and edit them. And we want to kind of have an idea of all those grants and incentives you put in. And then if you are needing to kind of demonstrate how you're financing the rest of the plan, you have this box down here that you can kind of put in how you would cover the balance of the planning costs, or for the construction application, the costs. And again, if you need to supplement that information with a kind of itemized budget, you can upload it down to the bottom. And then here is a document checklist. This differs for the construction and the construction and the planning. This is specifically just those documents that you wouldn't be able to necessarily answer questions in the boxes earlier. We do realize that there will be other documents that you will probably upload as you go through, but we want to highlight these ones at the end here. Again, you can upload them if you've missed them earlier on. And finally, this is, you'll actually, if you had uploaded files, you'll see all the previously submitted files uploaded at the bottom. Here, you'll be able to remove them as well at this point if you've found you've uploaded duplicates or the incorrect one, and you'll be able to add a replacement file if you need to. Then you can sign and date and then submit the application, and that will submit the application to Odo, and then you'll be able to amend if needed. So that's the end of the kind of the application there. Happy to answer questions on that or anything else as we go.
We have a ton of questions that have come in the chat that weren't necessarily pertaining to the application, although about the application, of course, but not like the technical aspects of it. So maybe we can get Rob back and I can just start buzzing through the chat. And folks are welcome to raise their hands and I'll get to them in the order that they're up, and maybe kind of go back and forth between chat and hands or something like that. So let's see. With the no shared screen, my everything just got kind of chaotic on me all of a sudden. So bear with me. Okay, so from the top, thanks everybody for your patience while I could not hear. That was total human error. I tried to blame WebEx for a while, but it was just my fault. Then I could, and everything was better. So Rob, I'm sorry, that must have been extremely uncomfortable for you. But I couldn't hear you. So
Out of curiosity, what was it? Because it'll happen to me too.
I had pushed my like mute button last night. For those who work from home, I work in my bedroom, and so I push a button so there's no alerts or anything. Yeah, and I hadn't done any meetings yet today, so I hadn't caught it yet. So now you all know that I'm in my bedroom right now. Thanks, Rob. All right. So there was a question about future funding cycles, and to be clear, we expect to get $50 million for this program over the course of 4 years and spread that out. And we had an answer that there will be 3 more rounds. It could end up that we end up with more money or different amounts of money or something like that. So just know that we anticipate 4 rounds, but just like with a asterisk that just depending on how things go, we could end up with like a remainder of money in a 4th round from here or something like that. And so we'll always keep everybody who's signed up for our interest list posted as we open up new rounds. And we expect it to feel relatively, we expect it to, the application portal to be open more often than it is not during the 4-year cycle. And then just having like periodic times when we grab all the applications. There was another question about, will we start reviewing before July 8th? And the answer is no. We're required in the statute to do competitive review. So we will wait until the 8th, and then we will start that competitive review process. And the first thing we'll do is that like completeness type of analysis. And so we will let folks know if there's any concerns with an application at that point. I'm curious, James, if we have somebody who turns in an application, we discover during our completeness review that it's incomplete, do we let them know and ask for more information, or do they just get, at this point, since it's not the last round, just suggested to reapply for the next round?
They will just need to reapply for the next round if it's an incomplete application. If there's maybe like a clerical minor error, like a missed signature or something, we may go back and request that. But if it's missed information in the application, it will be an incomplete application. It can, because we're hoping to have this open pretty quickly after that, it'll be an incomplete application, and it'll just go into the next round.
Great. We had a question about the 30% upon grant agreement and 70% upon completion. I answered it in the chat, but the bill was written so that we could give some money in advance because it's something we heard was a concern about having to wait till projects were complete to get any funding. But also we don't want to have a situation where we put all the money in and then the project doesn't get complete. So this was viewed as sort of a compromise measure there. And is that for both program or for both planning and projects or just for both? Great.
The
And then-
70% and then 30% is for both.
Great. We had a question about forming a community cooperative model and questions about limitations on whether the applicant is a newly formed organization. And I'm just buzzing through these here, guys. So like, correct me if I'm missing something, but I'm just trying to answer some of them that we can quickly. The applications are required almost exclusively to come from public bodies. And that's like government. Think about governments. That's like what is meant by public bodies. So this community cooperative that's being formed would need to work with a local government, for example, in order to put in an application. Tribes are also considered eligible. And then the one exception are co-ops. So essentially most consumer-owned utilities qualify as public bodies except co-ops. So we just specifically added in co-ops to the language of the bill to include them as well. So if that community cooperative is not a government, then you would need to partner with a governmental body. And then let's see, here's where we got a bunch of the questions about the application that I already went through. And then, okay, here's one I need help answering. Would a feasibility assessment be considered planning, or is planning intended more for design and pre-construction activities? That might be a Rob, that might be a James. Let's see, you guys.
Yeah, I'm off mute. I would say that feasibility assessments would be considered part of planning. But, keep in mind that these will be competitively scored against other like projects. And so projects that are really early on in their planning and doing feasibility assessments might not have as many opportunities to kind of score points in the scoring as a project that maybe has passed feasibility and is working on development of documents and permitting and things like that also happen in planning. But there's no exclusion for feasibility that I know of within our rules or the bill, and James can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll take one more from the chat and then I'll go to Scott with his hand up and then we'll go back to the chat. So Kristen was wondering about the timeline for a Word version, like a worksheet. I just want to be clear that we can put something like that together. The checklist is designed to sort of have that function so that you can kind of like use the checklist to get organized ahead of time, and that's already available. And then, but it's not in Word. And then the other thing is that the opportunity announcement directly follows the application. So if you have the opportunity announcement, you can kind of like go through it and figure out what you need to do. So we'll have some conversations about getting some sort of worksheet potentially up and online, but we don't necessarily have a timeline for that. I think because we felt like the checklist might have checked that box, no pun intended, but stay tuned. We'll make sure if we pop something online, we send it out to the folks that are online right now. And then Scott, I'm gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Presentation and on the Word version, a suggestion is even if you just did like screenshots of the online application and posted those, just so people could know how to start formulating an answer to the questions. The opportunity announcement's great. It's got lots of information, but it doesn't actually ask the questions. So my question has to do with we're looking at a community resilience project, and the description of the community benefits number 7, that we have to be located in a qualifying community. And to find the definition of qualifying community, it jumps you over to ORS 470. And a qualifying community is a community that qualifies as an environmental justice community, as defined in ORS 469A. So when you switch over to 469A, an environmental justice community includes communities of color, communities experiencing lower incomes, tribal communities, rural communities, coastal communities, et cetera, et cetera. I'm in Grants Pass, Oregon. Our project would be located in Grants Pass as selected. I think we would qualify as a rural community, but I don't know what the definition of a rural community would be. Can somebody help me out to point me towards a direction to see if we actually are an environmental justice community that is and therefore a qualifying community?
Yes. So I just decided to share my screen so folks could see that list that you just rattled off of what the definition of environmental
Oh,
justice.
I missed that slide.
Yeah. Oh no, it's fine. You just rattled it off. You found it your own way. One thing I'll just note is we have that advisory committee that we were asked to work with, and it was wonderful to work with them. We're really glad to have their advice. And one of the things that they said was that they wanted to avoid being overly prescriptive about the definitions for this, and that it made us a little. I think us government types are like, but we want specificity. But it was what they had to say was like, it's really up to a community to decide and to show how they fit this definition in the application. So we're respecting that. And so there's not like a hard set definition.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. But I think I will let James and Rob dial in, but I think if in the application, when it talks about how you serve these qualifying communities, there's some portions that ask those kinds of questions. You can explain it. Like, why do you think Grants Pass is a rural community? And how will this benefit communities experiencing lower incomes or communities of color within Grants Pass, and so on and so forth?
Okay.
Does that sound right, James? Rob, want to add anything?
Yeah, and I would just say one of the resources we put on the website was a list of kind of data or indicators that people can use to kind of demonstrate how their community might fit into one of these definitions and how they might be able to demonstrate that. So I would check out the applicant resources list, and we kind of tried to use a variety of different resources depending on which one an applicant may wish to use to kind of demonstrate that.
Yeah, and I would reiterate what Christy and James said, that in the absence of a strict definition, think about how a competitive review committee would view the project based on what you're telling us about the community benefits. And like Christy said, if a project within Grants Pass is located in a location that can serve lower income residents or communities of color or underrepresented communities in some way, that's going to, support that argument that it's a qualifying community. And maybe as we get through the program a couple of rounds and we start seeing things sort of congeal around definitions, we might be able to tighten it up. But right now we're letting communities essentially describe their own qualifications.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And one other thing I'll just say for those that are listening, you don't necessarily have to be a qualifying community. We just have a rule that 50% of the projects need to serve qualifying communities. So there'll be like a kind of an automatic benefit if you can make that argument and have it be accurate, of course. But just want folks to know that it's like a boon to your application, but not a requirement. And then this is one I definitely need Rob and James on. What defines the end of the planning phase? Is there a requirement to be done within I see there's a requirement to be done within 6 months. Is this equivalent to schematic design or a construction documents phase?
I'm happy to take a stab at this one. And we don't have any specific requirements that come out of the planning phase. Certainly, if you can demonstrate in the application that the planning is going to result in construction documents, that is about as far as you can go in planning and design before you start the construction phase. So that would be certainly qualifying, but we don't require that schematic design or construction documents be completed with that planning phase. Again, this is essentially up to the community to describe what they'll be planning, and there's no strict requirements.
Great. Hopefully that answers.
Just jump in and say, yeah, all the application needs to demonstrate is that the project will result in a proposal for developing a community renewable energy project. So
great. And then we have a question from Zachariah. Will you please share more info about the requirements of a letter of support from a governing body? And just to be clear, the applicants are required to be, in most cases, public bodies, the one exception being co-ops. Co-ops generally have sort of a board of directors, and then governing bodies tend to have some sort of board of directors. I think Zachariah might work at ODOT. For you, well, I don't know that you're planning to apply, but like maybe the Transportation Commission or whatever. So just to give an example, so that's the who we're looking for. Like essentially, we want to make sure that there's a letter to clearly show the authority of the applicant to join the grant. And generally speaking, that comes from the governing body. For me, for the state legislature, for the state of Oregon as an agency, we have to get permission to apply for a grant from the legislature, for example. So just that whoever that body is for your governmental unit, if you will. Hopefully that helps with that one. I already answered Brian's question. And then there's April that has the same name as one of my favorite people, but I don't think it's the same April. We're wondering if you have a definition of public welfare for Section 6. James?
Sure. So we don't have a specific definition as such. We're kind of leaving, again, that's something we're leaving up to the applicants to demonstrate how that structural facility is essential to the public welfare of that community, because we realize that different communities are going to use different buildings in different ways. However, in general, we would kind of consider the structure facility essential to the public welfare if it provides or we're providing an emergency kind of services to support the well-being of the community. So this could be something like a utility, a hospital, emergency responders, communications, community shelters, but it's not limited to those things. And a good way of like demonstrating that might be if it's outlined in an emergency response plan or something. But we are leaving it up to the applicant to kind of demonstrate how it is essential to that the public welfare of that community. And again, similarly to the qualified communities, it's something that's evaluated on a competitive basis in the competitive review. So that's just kind of how it's going to be assessed.
Great. All right, Scott, I see your hand up. I'm going to get through the chats that came in before we start, and then I'll circle back for your second question. Let's see. Keith from Farmers Conservation is planning a community solar garden. I'm assuming that's what CS is. Maybe it's a Christie split garden, but I doubt it. For irrigation district members. However, we may be offering subscriptions to local community members too. Can we get a more detailed definition of what stakeholder engagement would be? They've engaged the district substantially, but just wonder what we're looking for. I will just offer the thought that maybe you're hearing a theme here, that we're leaving a lot of these things open for communities to determine what that means for them as they apply. So that thread continues, I think, a little bit here. But we do want to see that meaningful engagement. So James, anything specific you want to add on to that?
I think it kind of depends on the project as well. I mean, more engagement is always good to see on these things, but if how the project's going to be, who the project's going to serve and where it's located, kind of the impacts it might have, kind of engaging with the people that are going to be impacted or benefit from the project is something that would be great to see. And so, yeah.
And one thing I'll channel from working on the bill during the legislative session and then also working with the advisory committee is that we were hearing from specifically people representing environmental justice communities that they wanted to see like evidence of engagement. So like, let's say let's say Beaverton applied for a grant, and they said this program is going to benefit the Latino population in Beaverton. But then it turns out they never actually like talked to the Latino population in Beaverton. So they wanted to actually sort of demonstrate that connection, that actually the governmental body had actually done the homework of working with that population to determine what they needed versus sort of deciding for them, or using that community that lives there to like draw this connection to benefit them in the application process. So this isn't like from us. I'm just sort of sharing some of the background that I think might be helpful to know. Let's see, I think this will be for maybe Rob, maybe James. Is project management an eligible cost for a construction project, and is there a maximum percentage allowed?
I don't mind taking a first stab, and it's related to some other questions we've had about how funds that are obtained by a public body for a grant kind of pass through to partners that are contracting for those funds with the public body. And so a project manager that is brought in using grant funds would be fine. We will release our funds to the public body that is the applicant, but how those funds are distributed by that public body to any number of subcontractors, including project managers, is really up to the grant awardee. And so we have no limitations on how those funds are spent by the public body, so long as they're all on qualifying expenses towards the project.
Great. And then the next question is from April again. In section 7 for the estimate, and then I'm going to come to you, Scott, next. In section 7 for the estimate of number of jobs connected to the operation of the project, I should slow down. In section 7 for the estimate of the number of jobs connected to the operation of the project and the associated hours. Do you have any suggestions for organizations that already have an existing structure and staff in place? So staff won't be added and workloads may increase, but hours won't. Thanks.
So that is in relation to kind of the jobs added. So it's kind of looking at and demonstrating that benefit. So I think if it's not benefit, you kind of putting it into how the project operation plan, and so you would kind of demonstrate. We'd be looking for how you would demonstrate that in the project operation plan, rather than potentially adding in how new jobs that are created, because it sounds like that wouldn't be the case for that specific kind of situation.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to Scott. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks again. So I listening to other answers, I think I sort of have an answer to this one, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. So eligible costs for construction include consultation, design, and construction. I'm just curious though, we have a project, we have a concept of it, we've already done a feasibility study on portions of it. Would final project scoping and design as a component of a construction project be something that's appropriate for construction funds, or is it better to seek a planning grant first and come up with schematic drawings and then apply for a construction project in future rounds? And I ask this because I'm assuming there's lots of other agencies like ours that have an idea, but I doubt there are many that have gone through and dedicated resources to coming up with solid construction drawings without having a source of construction funds on their own. So I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I'll sit back and listen. Thank you.
So I can share a little bit, where planning stops and construction starts is not a hard line in our program. I would say one thing to keep in mind is if you're doing a construction application, you should have a project that's going to be ready to start construction within a year and complete construction within 3 years. And if it's not at that stage where you can get it done according to the parameters laid out in the statute, you might consider a planning grant to get it further along so that it's more shovel ready for the construction grant. But if you're far enough along that you think you can get the project done according to the timeline, which it's in the statute, it's kind of tight, especially with today's construction environment. If you think you can get it done under those parameters, then it's okay to go straight to construction.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next up, this is another, we're definitely getting a lot of questions on like how to show stakeholder and community engagement. This is a specific question though that I'll add on. Do you have examples of community engagement activities? And I think we've kind of said like, we just want to see evidence of it, go forth, do what works for you. But to give some examples might be helpful. So Rob, James, you two can think of some. I know one thing that I've heard specifically is like putting in, we held meetings with this many people on this date would be an example. Or some other thoughts have been like letters of support coming from those communities or organizations that work with them. Any other thoughts, Rob, James?
Yeah, just kind of surveys and stuff like that. I think in some of the opportunity announcements, we kind of just give a couple of examples of what it might include in there as well. So I'll take a look at the opportunity announcements as well when you're filling out those sections of the application.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Let's see. This really wants me to look at this. The next question is, will a competitive applicant either receive the full amount requested or nothing, or will reduced grants be contemplated?
I would say that at this point, we are planning to award the entire grant that's requested. If we end up in a situation where there are a lot more applicants than there is money, and we thought we could make more projects happen by distributing the funds in some other manner, maybe it's going to depend on how our application periods look. But this grant is a little different than many in the past, where we are actually able to provide 100% funding for resilience projects and planning resilience projects, or any planning projects and community and construction projects. So those projects that need 100% funding may not go if we cut that back. So, and I know I saw several questions coming through about match requirements, and so that's kind of related, where the only type of project that requires match is if you're constructing a renewable energy only project with no resilience features. And in that case, we can provide 50% funding. But I think the first round, we're planning to go all or nothing. And James, you can chime in if you have a different idea.
No, that sounds good.
So we still have a bunch more questions and it's 10 o'clock right now. I know I can stay on and work through some of them. I don't know if James and Rob can. I know some people will need to leave, but I'm happy to just sit here and work through these. As long as the questions came in by 10:01, we'll answer them. But please, if you could, I put the email address up here on the screen. So if you have questions, you haven't put them in the chat yet, just go ahead and email the question and then we'll get back to you that way. Because I have to draw the line somewhere, I guess. So, okay. So let's see. The slide deck will be available. We'll post it on our web page after this. I went down to see how many questions we had left, and now I'm having to go back. Okay. One of the checklist items is a documentation of feasibility consultation with your related electric utility. Do we have a specific form or expectation of what that should look like or include?
Well, it could include a few different things. For a construction grant, having evidence of an interconnection application being submitted and or approved would certainly let the competitive review committee see that you've been consulting with the utility. For a planning grant, the intention of submitting an interconnection agreement, and perhaps evidence of email or phone call communications with the utility. Especially for the planning grants, we didn't want to saddle that process with a lot of letters from external stakeholders that may be hard to get. And so we're not requiring a letter from the utility necessarily, but some evidence that the interconnection process has been initiated is really what we're looking for.
I think in the construction opportunity announcements as well, there's a little more detail in there about what it might contain as well. Just to the point that Rob made about we were looking for a little more detail in that construction applications as well.
Great. The next question is, how will applications be reviewed? We are doing a multi-part process for this. The bill requires a competitive review. We're going to use an external review team for part of this. We'll also do a couple of reviews internally, completeness, making sure the application's complete and the project's eligible before we move it on to having the competitive review team look at it, or the external review team look at it. We'll also do a technical feasibility study inside the agency. So there'll be a lot of different review steps that happen. I know there's a question further down about if we have like a scoring rubric, and we do. And I'm wondering if it's online.
The scoring criteria is in the opportunity announcements for each of them. So that's how there will be competitively reviewed.
Great. So that form will be used throughout that process and is what we'll be grading on. We'll be sending around information on how to join the external review committee, and working to put that review committee ahead of the July 8th deadline. Obviously you're here because you're interested in applying for the program, so you probably don't want to be on it, but because we won't pick people that will have conflict of interest. But let's see, in conduit hydroelectric qualify as energy resilience or renewable energy only? Rob?
So in conduit hydro could qualify as resilience. Again, within the competitive review process, it's going to be competing against presumably projects that are, using some renewable, including in conduit hydro and storage, with the idea that it can provide backup power in the event of an emergency. So in conduit hydro, which is not going to be running during the winter months, might not score as well as a project that can provide backup power 24/7, 365. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't be providing some resilience value. So again, within the competitive review, the review committee is going to consider how that project can be available for supporting a community in the event of a power outage.
Michaela has a question that I think is best answered by just sharing the definition we have for resilience for this. It comes from the bill. She was wondering if it includes more holistic economic resilience. I'm not super sure what that means, but maybe our definition would be helpful. One of you could summarize that for us.
So the resilience talks, I think, specifically about community energy resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, we have definitions for those in rules. So we can kind of put those in.
I think the bottom line is it's sort of like, how does it help the power to how does it help provide power during an outage kind of stuff. It's like in that vein.
How it
Versus-
supports those services in like an event of a power outage or natural disaster or something.
Yeah, exactly.
The bill says community energy resilience project means a community renewable energy project that includes utilizing one or more renewable energy systems to support the energy resilience of structures or facilities that are essential to the public welfare. And so that really is about the critical infrastructure and supporting energy facilities. And the energy resilience, I would say that the economic resilience is something that you could put in kind of the community benefits section of the application. However, most applications that we get, we expect to have economic benefits rippling through the communities. So if there's one that really distinguishes those economic benefits to, say, a qualifying community, that would be worth putting in the application. But the resilience piece is really about backup power.
I'm sort of confused by the next question. Let me see if he's still on. Hey, Josh Clausen, will you raise your hand if I can take you off mute? And then if you raise your hand, I'll ask your question. But otherwise, I don't. Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks. All right. Sorry that oh, now I lost you. Okay. You are now unmuted, I hope. Yeah. Oh, no, I unmuted the wrong person. Okay, now try. Josh, you should be off mute now.
So my question was, as we are applying for these grant applications, what are the criteria for final acceptance? Basically, we don't want to get into a position where we've gone through all these steps, accepted the 30% grant, and then we're into a problem where we don't qualify for the last 70%, but we've already spent those funds to get that project underway. And so we'd just like to see if there's a way we could get that published where we'll know what the final criteria for acceptance are before we begin the project.
I
So
know
think-
that
Sorry.
performance. Oh, go ahead. I mean, I know performance agreements are like kind of the avenue or the venue where this will take place, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But like on solar applications and whatnot, there's different governing agencies that are going to be involved with the final performance checks on these systems, whatever they end up being as far as the scope. And we just want to be sure that we can check all the boxes off and say, okay, we are now ready for final acceptance from ODOE, and have some idea that we are ready to go.
Are you referring to planning or construction grants?
I'd probably be construction grants.
So I think the one of the requirements is going to be that CPA verification letter along in the final report as well. We kind of detail that. A lot of the other ones will be specified in the performance agreement. And I'm just going to check a few other places if Rob, you want to have add anything to that.
Yeah, so during the construction phase of projects, we will have periodic reporting requirements with ODO staff so that we can keep up to date with how the project is going. And one example of something that could happen would be the need for an extension of time. And the bill gives us the ability to do that once so that we can provide an extension. But at the final stage of a construction project, we will have an on-site inspection, and we'll be looking for a fully operational project that is demonstrating that it is online, exporting power to the grid, or having power used on site. It's essentially a fully operational system that can pass our on-site inspection. But again, we'll be working with you throughout the project with periodic reporting requirements for progress checks within the grant.
Do you I don't know if you can even answer this right now, but do you foresee a time when, let's say, the local authorities having jurisdiction approve a project, but Oregon State will have app, higher acceptance application? Criteria for this acceptance. Where I'm just saying, like maybe Oregon is going to say, we need this built to a better standard than what you've done, but your local inspectors have passed it.
So the only case where our requirements exceed the local code and the local jurisdiction is for shading requirements on solar projects. The local jurisdiction and the code would allow anyone to install solar in the shade or on the north side of a roof,
Right.
because it's still electrically safe. Our program would not approve a project that was putting a system in a low resource area. But the local jurisdiction, once they sign off on it as having met the local code requirements, we don't have any requirements beyond those. The local sign off by the jurisdiction and the utility as far as technical requirements go. So no,
Okay.
we don't have beyond code requirements beyond the solar resource or the wind resource.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. You're on mute, Christy.
My next door neighbors, landscapers are here, so timing. So I'm having to deal with that now. The next couple, I think I can buzz through, so that's exciting. One of them is our matching funds are a requirement. They are not. Just to confirm, a project in IOU territory could qualify. Yes, that's correct. They just can't apply PGE and PAC. The slide deck, yes, will be available. There's, I guess when we were talking about definition of rural, Tomas Endicott shared an USDA's definition, and I think is probably part of the suite of options that James put together. And then we have someone who can't get audio. Me too. Sorry, we can't hear me say it. Governing body. We're a nonprofit partnering with a city. Would that be our board of directors? Or it needs to be the city that applies, to be very clear. So this is for Jim. I hope he's still on the line. The city has to apply, and it would be the city council in this case that would need to be the governing body. And then there's an intergovernmental body, a formal agreement between a county and a judicial department. They just want to confirm that this is doable. So can two governmental bodies, having created a new governmental body, apply? Both are public bodies, you've articulated.
So I think that stems from the definition of a public body kind of going in there, and I think there is a it depends how the two government bodies together.
We could always get back to Kristen if we need to.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it in here just to make sure I get that's it. So there is an intergovernmental body. If it's formed between two public bodies, it kind of meets that definition, but we can kind of just follow up and double check if there's any confusion. But there is, if you go into the definition of public body and then you go into the definition of special government body, I believe in there is a section that talks about intergovernmental bodies and how they meet the criteria of public bodies. So I would recommend just kind of going in there, make sure that this intergovernmental body has been formed, kind of meets that definition, and verifying that. And if they have any questions, I'm happy to kind of talk to them about that or follow up after this meeting.
All right, I think we're down to our last few. Thanks, James. This one's from Jenny Hall at ETO. Hi, Jenny. Who I'm like just checking people are still on the line. So she wants to know if an entity, this is complicated. Okay. An entity is partnering with a government body, and then the government body enters into the performance agreement, and then the government body passes through any requirements to the entity actually pursuing the project, which I think is right. And then it says, would it be possible to get an example of the contract agreement terms that the governing body would be required to meet? And I think that's just the performance agreement, right? we're not really managing the relationship down from the governing body to anybody underneath them.
No, the performance agreement will be between Odo and the applicant. So
Great. Okay. And then let's see. Zachariah again. Can one apply for a construction grant next round if awarded a planning grant this round, which may not officially be completed? So they get the planning grant now, then they apply for our next due date, let's say for the construction grant, but the planning work is still happening. Is that possible?
yes, as long as they meet the timelines requested in the application, that they can demonstrate they're gonna, if they go for the construction grant next, that they can meet that, start within 12 months and then complete within 36. That's fine.
Great. Okay. And then I think maybe we have our last question. So this is from Kristen. Would meeting minutes suffice to make it clear that this project was discussed with a wide range of community members and sectors and given the green light to proceed? I think that that would be one of the examples, right, of a way of showing that public engagement has happened.
Yeah, meeting minutes, kind of assigning sheets from public meetings, things like this would be great evidence of kind of outreach that's been done with the community.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for about 50% of the folks that were on stuck around for the extra 18 minutes. And thanks, Robin and James, for being flexible with me so that we could get to the questions that we've been asked. You have the information for, you can easily find us by Google to find our website. And then the email address, we're getting back to folks as we get questions, and then we're posting the answers to the questions online. On our website for the project, you can even see all the questions we've already been asked, and that Patricia, who's on the line, who has wonderfully compiled these questions, helped spearhead getting answers to them, and then made them available as sort of a living FAQ for folks. So please go ahead and look there, and some of your questions might already be answered. Any other thoughts before we end the call? Great. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.